Good morning, thoughts from the car on this Wednesday. So yesterday I got caught behind a train twice at two different stops, and it caused me to be late to my son's baseball game where he was supposed to be the starting pitcher. And I was angry. I was so angry sitting waiting for this train then the second time for 20 minutes while it stopped right in front of me. And it's one of those things where if I turn around now, the train is going to start moving and you're going to be angry even more. But the point of it is that I was so angry about this. And it was the first time that I can think of where I was angry and I did not feel shame for my anger. I did not feel guilt for my anger. And that is a huge thing for me, because I grew up feeling like anger was such a terrible thing. And throughout my adulthood, I have avoided anger. And so I went through this very angry period during my burnout, and I felt so much shame and guilt for it. And it was something that I really had to work through so that I could heal from it and come out the other side. And I'm out the other side and I'm really excited about it. So today I want to talk about the stigma around anger and why we don't need to be ashamed of it, and what we can do to, help ourselves. So anger, there is definitely a stigma around anger, but anger is a natural and very valid feeling. Yet there's this negative stigma around it. And I think it's important for us to understand why oftentimes we might feel guilt or shame for anger specifically. And I think the first thing is that there is a societal expectation. Our society puts a very high value on calmness, on politeness, and emotional control in general, and for valid reasons. But because of that societal norm, because of that societal expectation, when we actually do have a legitimate reason for feeling angry, we might be afraid to express it because we don't want to deviate from that. And oftentimes I think there's this internalized belief that a lot of people have. I know I grew up with it and I still have this internalized belief that I'm working through that it's a negative thing to be angry, that it is a lack of control and it's a sign of weakness to be angry in general, to have angry feelings and to feel the powerful emotion of anger. And I don't think that that's true. I don't think it's a weakness. I don't think that anger in and of itself is showing a lack of control. So I think that it's something that, because we have to remember that it's a natural human emotion. And there are legitimate reasons sometimes to be angry about things, that we can't think about anger in general, have this overarching idea that anger is a bad thing or a shameful thing or something we need to judge or criticize ourselves for. And then I think a lot of times too, people fear the consequences of anger. So there can be consequences when we get angry, just like everything. There are good consequences and bad consequences. And sometimes they're just consequences. They're not even good or bad. It's just the cause and effect of something. And so, but there are consequences to it. Oftentimes these consequences can lead to impulsive actions when we are very angry and we're not completely calm and thinking clearly. So we can have impulsive actions, which can lead to hurtful words and hurtful actions that we make. So I think sometimes people fear that. They fear it because of the negative consequences that maybe they've experienced in the past, either through damaged relationships or a job loss or a myriad of different reasons and experiences that people have had in the result of their anger. So they fear those consequences. They fear the experiences that they had. And then I think there are also a lot of cultural and gender norms. I've talked about this before, where with anger specifically, where men are often encouraged to express their anger, whereas women are taught to suppress their anger because we are taught culturally that this is the gender norm. And so if one of the genders deviate from that, where women get angry, they are just seen as overly emotional, and then they're completely disrespected. They're not respected at all because, they're so emotional. They're making emotional decisions, and they're not seen as valid. And so their opinions aren't seen as valid because of the anger of emotion, because culturally we've decided that women need to be meek and mild and calm at all times and cannot have any passion and emotions, such as anger. Whereas with men, if they don't express their anger, or they are gentle, or they are calm, then they are seen as weak. They are seen as less than, and they are not true men because they can't protect people because they don't get angry. So whenever you deviate from what the cultural gender norm is, there can bring a lot of shame, can come along with that. And I think there's also then from that, the fear of rejection, from either deviating from what is the cultural norm, or there is that fear of rejection from people around us because we get angry, because we have opinions and we don't want to be rejected or seen a certain way, or someone has a certain perspective of us and we don't want that rejection that perspective brings. So because that can bring isolation, and that brings loneliness, and that brings a whole host of feelings and other problems that we then have to deal with because we've been rejected either by society or a group of friends or in a relationship, whatever it may be that we feel rejected from or isolated from. So then how do we like look at anger? What can we see anger as not being shameful? Like, how do we not see it as shameful? And I think something that's really important to understand about anger is that anger oftentimes points to a lot of other feelings, a lot of other things. It is oftentimes a mask. And so some of the things that anger points to is it is a sign of discomfort. So oftentimes it signals that something is wrong, something is not okay, and that there is a need that is not being met. So it's a discomfort sign. So if we can look at anger from that vein, from that viewpoint, this can help us take ourselves out of that shameful feeling of I'm angry and so I'm bad, or I'm not good enough, or I should be this, that, or the other thing, right? Or people need to be protected from me. So if we can look at anger in a different vein, that it is a sign of discomfort, it's pointing to discomfort, that something is not right and a need is not being met. It also motivates us to change. So oftentimes, because a need's not being met, this makes us address the issues that need to be changed. And this causes us to change. This can be a great catalyst for making changes in our life. When we are very angry about a situation or a relationship or circumstance or what have you, whatever it is, when we feel that discomfort and we sit in that discomfort and we look at that discomfort and we ask the right questions to really get to the root of what our anger truly is and what it's pointing to, this can motivate us to change. And again, we have to remember that anger is a natural response. It is absolutely a natural response when we have been wronged, when we have been hurt, and when we have been threatened. We have to remember that God made anger. The divine made anger. Creator made anger. There is a reason for anger. Anger can be a good thing, a catalyst for these things, for understanding there's discomfort, understanding something needs to change, getting that passion that we need sometimes in order to protect ourselves. So it is a normal and it is a healthy expression. It helps us communicate our needs, and it also helps us understand that there is something that needs to be addressed, that everything is not okay. And it helps us to understand that we are so different, that everybody has different opinions. And this brings us out of like bondage. And oftentimes, where we're not just, in apathy. Anger is the combator to apathy, where we can stand up for ourselves. And it gives us that energy and drive sometimes to stand against things that are not okay. And so anger can be a very good and healthy emotion. But like I said, it is a mask. Oftentimes anger is a mask. It is oftentimes a mask for feelings like fear and sadness and hurt and frustration and confusion and helplessness and insecurity. So if we can make sure that we understand that anger is usually the secondary or the mask for the first feelings, the deeper feelings that we're feeling, this can be a really good starting point for us in awareness for our insecurity, and we can unmask it. So I think I want to talk about now how we can what we can do when we feel angry. So what can we do when we feel angry? When we feel angry, instead of flying off the handle, we can use anger in a constructive way. So I think we can be angry in a constructive way. And the first way we do that is by identifying and acknowledging our anger. That is the first thing. It's always awareness. We have to identify that we're actually angry, so we have to understand, why am I angry? Like, what is going on here? What are there other feelings that I'm feeling? And I think there's some really good questions we can ask ourselves when we have feelings of anger. The first thing that we have to do is we have to pay attention to the physical sensations in our body. When we are feeling a certain way, when we pay attention to the sensations in our body on an ongoing basis, we're going to be able to recognize certain feelings that we're feeling. So, the good question is what is the certain sensation I'm feeling? Am I clenching my jaw? Do I feel, a knot in my stomach? Do I feel fire in my chest? These are all different sensations that people have described when they feel anger. So is it actually anger, or is it another feeling of I have this pit in the bottom of my stomach that doesn't feel good? Do I feel scared? Am I feeling shaky? Am I feeling like I can't walk? Am I trembling? What are the physical sensations? That would lead us then to feel that we're feeling insecure or scared or not sure of ourselves. And so that oftentimes the anger becomes a mask for that feeling. So understanding the sensations in our body and asking ourselves the questions, what sensations am I actually feeling, is very, very helpful. And then I think the second thing when we are recognizing our feelings is we have to understand the trigger. What is the trigger for what we're feeling, specifically with anger? So we have to reflect on those triggers. And the good question we can ask ourselves is there a pattern? Is there a theme that is bringing up this specific feeling of, maybe it is anger, maybe it is insecurity, maybe it is this feeling of fear, So is there a pattern? Is there a root to the feeling that we're feeling? And is this something that we can address? Okay. And then I think the second thing, after we have taken this awareness and after we have, understood the triggers, is we have to express ourselves assertively. And this means we have to use I statements. So it's not, you are so annoying. It's, I feel frustrated when, and then we can go into when you do this, that, or the other thing. But it's using I statements. It's taking radical responsibility for our feeling, especially when it comes to anger, and angry type negative feelings. it's important for us to use those I statements. And we can do this much easier when we have decided we're going to communicate clearly and we're going to avoid yelling and we're going to choose our words wisely and not use insulting language. And I think we can do this better by practicing mindfulness on a regular basis. So when we find ourselves in that angry state or in that highly emotional state, it may not just be anger, it may be other feelings that we're feeling, but it's like those negative feelings, and we're in that high state of negativity, is we need to ask ourselves, what needs are not being met? What am I trying to communicate, one, and what needs are not being met that I'm trying to communicate? Those are two really good questions to help us communicate calmly, because then we understand what needs aren't being met. And this will also help us choose our words wisely, because we're thinking about how we're going to be communicating rather than just yelling out and making these accusations instead of making statements that are about ourselves and how we are actually feeling and a need that is not being met for us. Something that I think is also important is that we have to take a break. It's really important for us, especially when we're talking about anger, for us to take time to cool down and then come back later. It is totally okay to come back later. Now, it's not okay to just walk out. I do think that we have to say, I need a break. Again, it's using that I statement, and I need to cool down. I think that that is when we can express ourselves assertively by saying, I need to cool down. I need a break. And during that time when we cool down and when we're taking that break, specifically when we're having anger, I think we can ask these questions. We can ask ourselves, what are the underlying beliefs or assumptions that I'm holding, either about the situation, the circumstance, about this person? What is it when we're cooling down? What is it that I'm assuming here? Am I assuming something here? And I think this is super important with all of our emotions, with all of our feelings, but specifically in anger. And it's really good when we decide to walk away and we're cooling down after we've said, I need to cool down. We've asserted ourselves, for us to ask that question and then really dig into what you're actually believing about the situation. And then, we have to challenge those negative thoughts, challenge those things to see if it's true or if it's not true. And then, it's really important for us to seek support too. Sometimes we have to find that safe person that we need to talk to. Maybe it's our therapist if it's like this ongoing issue with anger. Maybe it is a coach who needs to help us problem solve through things. Maybe it is a trusted friend whom we can be real with and we can express some of those heavier, more explosive emotions that we have, and they can take it and that they're open to it and they're in a good spot to be able to take it. They're safe both ways. They're able to hold boundaries and give you boundaries. So we have to seek support. I think that's really important. And when we seek support, I think it's really important for us to ask this question of, am I expecting too much from myself and others? That is a really good question for us to ask. We can ask ourselves this as well when we're cooling down, but I think it's also a really good question for us to ask others when we're seeking support from other people, when we find ourselves in a really angry place. And then also, we can get into that problem solving mode. I think that this is a really healthy thing. When we find ourselves really angry, oftentimes it's because we feel helpless. I know that is very true for me. When I feel helpless and I'm feeling insecure about a situation, it's very easy for me to go to anger, and then I feel shame for the anger because, I understand that it's about control, and then I feel shameful about that. But it's really good for us to then get into problem solving mode. Instead of focusing on the shame, focusing on the guilty feelings for the anger, or focusing on the helpless feelings, we can ask ourselves some questions to be able to identify where we actually do have control, where we can actually maybe make a change, and maybe we aren't so helpless. So we have to identify the root of why we're feeling this certain way. Why are we feeling angry? Is it because we're feeling insecure, we're feeling helpless? Okay, well then we need to brainstorm some solutions. Where am I not helpless? What can I actually do to fix this problem? Is there something that I'm missing? And again, we go to our people, our safe people, we can ask them, we can brainstorm with them. And this will oftentimes bring us more calmness because we have an outside influence, somebody else's energy, a calming energy specifically, to help us cool down, to help us think about these things, to help us brainstorm solutions to the problem rather than just stewing in the anger. And then we can take that constructive approach of whatever we have brainstormed, whatever we have figured out, we are able to do, what we are able to control in the situation to make it better, and take that constructive approach towards solving the problem that is causing the angry issue. Okay, so anger. It's a big thing. It's not something we need to be shameful for, feel ashamed of. So your challenge is that if you are someone who feels like you are a detriment in your angry state, maybe use some of these techniques to help you get through anger. Ask yourself some of these questions. And I would really like to encourage you, if you are somebody who is afraid of anger and you feel ashamed of anger, for you to truly look at the root of your anger. Like, why do you have these angry outbursts? What is the feeling that is behind it? What feelings are you masking in your angry state? Because I really think that is what's going to be very healing emotionally for having chronic anger and having all those guilty feelings about anger and the things that happen. Okay, guys, have a wonderful Wednesday.